from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
24 weeks of the CFL's 2024 campaign are complete, with 2 squads standing and 1 game yet to be played in Sweet Van City. But prior to Grey Cup, well, let's look back at what was a wild East and West championship weekend. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Joining me, look at these 3 lads. Outstanding fellas that are full of love for our 3-down game. From the CFL on TSN lead analyst and Hall of Famer Glen Suter, he's in the house.
Hey, gentlemen.
From the home of the West Division winners, he is the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Derek Taylor.
My Bo Levi Mitchell-like record as a broadcaster leads me into this, so I'm very happy to be here.
Hey, he's been riding this wild up and down journey of the boatman, covering the Argonauts for Sportsnet, David Morassutti. How are you, partner?
Howdy, guys. How you doing?
All right, let's get down to business, guys. And unfortunately, we kind of start on a little somber note, though. Before we talk, a little X's and O's. Canadian sports media certainly lost a fine one recently. Winnipeg Free Press sports editor Ted Wyman lost his battle against cancer. And as a media colleague, someone that works in the same community and market as Ted, Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, Ted started as the sports director of the Sun in 2006, and when I got to the job as the voice of the Bombers in 2022, Ted was a firm part of our pregame show. He would come on, we would talk about what he'd written that week about camp, and he would about the Bombers and his thoughts about the game. So we got to know each other a little bit. He would travel on the road, and Ted was always social. It's like, hey, we're going out here for dinner. And me, I more preferred staying in the room and banging away at the computer and trying to figure out my lookups on Microsoft Excel and stuff like that. But there was always the invitation from Ted. So he loved being around the CFL and curling. And I mean, he would cover the Jets and everything. But the CFL and curling are the ones where I really got to know him and knew his stuff. Just an all-time dude. Just one of those guys. You're happy. You watch him. You could take the inspiration from how he handled his personal life, the way he liked to enjoy, take a slice of this city and that city, the way he worked, the way he wrote. You could certainly draw inspiration from that. It's left a real hole in the Winnipeg sports community that we've lost now. Ted Wyman. He said to me. He told me in May. He was on our pregame show in May on the first preseason game. He said, I want to be back by Labor Day. And that was always the hope. And he kept fighting for that, and it never did come to be. So, yeah, it's a real loss for us here.
Suits is someone that travels the country, and not only as a player, but obviously as yourself as a media guy. I'm sure you've been able to touch the arms and the voices and the personalities of so many across the country, and Ted's certainly one of them.
Yeah, he really was. I think at times, because I have publicly disagreed with some of the writers in the country, that some have sort of taken that as it's me against them, or that I always don't agree. But it's just not true. Sometimes, I want to bring up some different perspectives and get into some different discussions where I don't agree all the time with a lot of the guys. Ted never seemed to be one of them. And I read him all the time. I didn't know him well, but I did know in any social gathering, he would sort of be the open arm, hey, come in, let's talk. And there is one thing that I know you could tell immediately. If you spent 5 minutes with him, you could tell immediately how much he loved the game. And it isn't me against the media. It isn't TV against the media. It's guys that all have passion for the game and want to discuss it. So yeah, he'll be missed, and the league is going to miss. I mean, obviously, our thoughts are to his family and friends, but the league is really going to miss a passionate writer that was a storyteller and a messenger. The message of how great our game is. Ted told that message and spread that that news, and that will be missed big time by the league.
David, it's interesting when things like this happen. We always bring up the word perspective, and you get to really understand that, you know what, we all, the four of us here, love this game so much, and we criticize it, we applaud it, we are excited about it. But really, at the end of the day, the community is so small that talk about Canadian football, and it really is an awakening.
Yeah, and I met Ted when I was first covering the Argos in Toronto, and like he was one of the few media that were coming from the opposing team to come to Toronto for games. So, and I remember the Grey Cup and him, in a way was taking me a little bit, showing me around with things to look out for. So, he saw I was a younger person. I really do appreciate what he did in terms of getting me sort of through the chaos that is Grey Cup week. And hearing stories, even just in passing when we have the media parties, and hearing what he had to say, and it's just everyone kind of gravitated towards Ted, and I think that's what made him such a polarizing person, is that everyone had a story about him. You look at all the tributes that came, and all the people that were expressing their sadness with everything. And I remember even when he was battling cancer, to see that the Blue Bombers, how much they put out their support towards them too. Like, it doesn't always happen like that for a reporter, but that's what Ted meant to that community. And I think that's something that can't be, something that should be appreciated, because he really did love the team. He loved the sport. He loved the league. And it's glad that he was recognized for that.
I remember the first time I met him, actually, was on when Hamilton hosted the first of the two Grey Cups, and we were on the media bus, and he saw the CFL. It was the first year of the CFL this week on the Ticats Audio Network, and he's like, "How come I didn't get the invite? How are you going to get me on that show? I want to be on that show." And of course, we got him on. And boy, he is a wonderful personality, and as you said, his knowledge of the league and his love of the league were just certainly apparent. He certainly will be missed. This broadcast, obviously, will be for him. So let's have a little happy conversation and talk some football as much as he would love it. And we're going to talk about the East Final right now. I'll tell you, David, let's start with you because you cover the team the most. The Argonauts win. Boy, I'm not going to go as far as can they win the Grey Cup with Chad Kelly on the sidelines. We'll get to that later. But how impressed were you with this victory? Resilience was certainly the word.
Yeah, I mean, just the emotional toll when you see your starting quarterback go down with that type of injury, right? When you know for a fact that is a gruesome injury, like it's hard to regroup. I mean, you saw it on the broadcast, the reaction from Ryan Dinwiddie, the emotion. So it wasn't just like being able to hold the lead, but to keep yourself emotionally in the game and understand that you still had a lot of game to play, right, to keep that lead. I think that resiliency is kind of a message of this Argos team. It's been an up and down season, but they've battled through some tough situations. And so, yeah, you give them a lot of credit for being able to do that, because, Montreal had every opportunity to get themselves the lead, they came close. It wasn't easy, right? But I think you just credit the Argos for keeping themselves emotionally in check after that injury to Chad Kelly.
I know both you guys were obviously probably getting ready for your game at Princess Auto Stadium, but Derek, when you saw the final score, were you shocked?
Not really, no. There were a couple weeks ago, I put it out on our pregame show that I thought Toronto was the biggest threat to win the Grey Cup of the Bombers' chances. I just looked at what they did, how their front, and we'll talk more about this coming up, how their front dominated the Bombers' front in the most recent matchup. I went, oh boy, that team is for real. When Chad Kelly goes down, it turns a lot. But man, they came a long way this season. That defense, okay, it's a little leaky in the back, but man, they forced turnovers. Walter Fletcher with a fumble and the drop that ended up in the pick six. And you go, okay, well, luck is not smiling on the Alouettes. The Argos are doing their thing, and they did enough after Kelly left to hold on to that one. So the spots I saw in the pregame went, okay, well, yeah, this is kind of what I thought could, whatever the word is happen. Two real good teams. I thought any four of them could be in the Grey Cup, and any one of them could win the Grey Cup. And yeah, here we are. Toronto upsets the reigning champions.
Glenn, it maybe you got to point to the head coach a little bit, and not only for that game, maybe that's just a microcosm of the entire season. As I said to David earlier in his introduction, the Boatman's travels this year have been up and down and up and down and so much drama. But Coach Dinwiddie has kept them on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, he has, and they haven't lost, through the regular season more than 2 games in a row, and they only did that twice. So it was like when things were going sideways or weren't where they needed to be for them to win a game, they made corrections quickly. So that is, the coaching staff that should take credit for that in a big way, because those are the adjustments that are needed. I think this team is just, when you look at a team and you say, okay, let's check all the boxes and see if they're good in these areas. So if you're looking at offense, can they make those big plays down the field, the explosions? Check. Yes, they can. Can they run the ball? Yes, check. They can. Can they dominate the line of scrimmage? Yes. And you start doing that with the Argos, and really quickly on all 3 phases, you figure out they're really good in all 3 phases. They really are. And we can talk about the matchup coming up in the Grey Cup, but as far as that final, that to me was an illustration of all 3 phases contributing. Their special teams with Janarian, they can make the explosive play down the field. They can go to a run game, a ground game, and grind it up. And, their defense can make plays. Their defense is difficult to read, I think. Which is probably one of the reasons that the 2 Bomber games were so low scoring.
Derek, you've seen Janarian Grant do his thing before. I'll tell you, you let this guy loose, and he can be a game changer.
Yeah, our Doug Brown, the Hall of Famer and my radio partner, lamented because he was told $85,000 would have kept him in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg, you will note, has 0 return touchdowns this season. Their 2 special teams touchdowns came from their punt team, not their punt return team. So watching him do it in the playoffs, you go, yeah, I remember that from 2023 and 2022. I believe both the Western Final and the Grey Cup in 2022. He is just dynamite. There's a I don't know if it's a trend, but it was noticeable in the Western Final. It's been noticeable for the Bombers that returners will get upfield and then, I've got enough, and they'll take out of bounds because who needs to get obliterated to get 1 more yard? Well, Janarian Grant don't care. Like, that guy listed $157, doesn't care. I watched him a couple years ago drag 240-pound Cody Grace for an extra 6 yards. You go, this guy just wants yards and into the end zone, and he's not very braggadocious when he gets there. Super quiet about being the best returner in the game, but I will, from the booth in BC Place, I will be holding my breath whenever Jamison Sheehan punts to him or Sergio Castillo kicks off to him.
David, okay, I'm going to be honest here. I have to say this. Every time Nick Arbuckle took a snap and dropped back to pass, I said, here comes the pick. Here comes the pick. But it didn't happen. He was solid right down the stretch and made that big throw to Ungerer when the game was at its highest peak. He came through.
This is why Ryan Dinwiddie wanted Nick Arbuckle around this year, because, he has a lot of trust in Arbuckle throughout the year. It was all about Cameron Dukes, right? Cameron Dukes was going to be the guy that would take over with Chad Kelly suspended, and Arbuckle was kind of waiting in the wings. And you could see little by little that Arbuckle just understood what Ryan Dinwiddie wanted, right? It's one thing to know the playbook. It's another thing to execute to the level that Ryan Dinwiddie wants. And, Arbuckle's willing to be aggressive, but he's he knows enough to know that, is playing against these CFL defenses what you can and can't do. And that's, I think, what makes Nick Arbuckle, what made him the perfect candidate to, come into the game at that point. Because he's done it throughout the year, right? Cameron Deuce has struggled, throw in Nick Arbuckle, right? And he's found ways to make plays. I think that's what the Argos appreciated. And, how many teams have a Nick Arbuckle ready to step in, right? There are a few teams that do, but to be able to do it at the level that he did and to have the trust of the coaching staff to not even change the game plan, right? Because sometimes a quarterback comes in, let's just give it to the running back, just don't lose the ball, right? Throw a couple of short passes. No, he was right in the fire there, and he was ready to go as soon as his name was called.
And Bubba,
Glen.
one quick one.
Right to you.
His head coach knows this scenario firsthand.
Yes.
You guys all know what I'm talking about. Kevin Glen gets hurt in the final years ago, and Dinwiddie starts the Grey Cup. I mean, and almost wins it that year. So he knows the advice he can give Arbuckle in this scenario.
Bubba, is there a personal foul I can throw, a flag I can throw for bringing up the 07 Grey Cup? Is that that's still a sore point with Bomber fans, right? Man, Suits, you're killing me.
Well,
it might work.
It's exactly it. There's some truthers saying, well, Arbuckle has experience. Cool, but the neatness of the story is it's the situation Dinwiddie was thrown into. Now he's having it thrown at him as a head coach. Arbuckle's got experience, sure, but starter to back up just for the Grey Cup it's a super neat parallel now 17 years later.
Yeah.
It's crazy that we can bring this up and we can all smile about it, because when Kate Biernes brought it up on the panel on TSN, Milt Stiegel told her to shut up.
Exactly.
He just said, "Shut up, Kate."
Yep. It be like that here in Winnipeg. That was one they felt they should have had, and it's what every team goes through, right? Like, injuries determine so much of how seasons go. Did you get healthy at the right time? Did you get injured at the wrong time? And unfortunately for the Argos, as they try to chase a second Grey Cup in 3 years, this is the injury you just do not want, and it's at exactly the wrong time.
Derek, right back to you, because I know you're the guy with the figures and the numbers and the computer brain. There's something out there about when you have more turnovers than another team that you are risking an opportunity at victory in the Montreal Alouettes. I don't know what happened. Jason Moss is still probably looking at the tape, but boy, did they look sloppy in this game, and it really hurt them.
I almost couldn't get over I really like Walter Fletcher since I first saw him in Edmonton, and he's been great for Montreal this year, running and catching the ball. When he has that one, like the drop, just a little flat, little whatever was in the flat, bloop, bloop out of his hands, and it goes back for the pick six. You go, you just, under no circumstances is that allowed to happen. You absolutely can't do either part of that. You can't drop a pass and you can't fumble it to the opponent. A fumble later, Fajardo with the fumble I forget where they were in the field exactly, if they were approaching the red zone or what it was. But yeah, turnovers are the absolute killer unless you are so much better than your opponent. The 21 West final, the Bombers got away with 6 turnovers against the Riders, and it kind of didn't matter that day. But in what was, as I approached both finals, I thought, these feel like they're super close. And okay, the West one didn't turn out, but turnovers are just everything. So you have to protect the ball. It absolutely destroyed the Bombers early in the season. They fixed it late in the season, and no coincidence they've won 10 of their last 11 games. But yeah, turnovers are just a killer, and you have to be ready for them in the playoffs. And just, I don't know how to say, Suits may be able to describe this better. I don't know how to say, don't fumble the football, but you can't, they change everything all the time.
Yeah, they really do. And, there's a balancing act that is necessary there too, because you want to be aggressive. You want to push the ball. You want to try to fit it into tight windows if you're throwing it. And, if Fletcher gets out on the flat and he wants to turn and run, he's got to do that pretty quickly. And so there's that balancing act between securing the catch, but not overcompensating and protecting it to a point where you're not getting any yards. So, it's a balancing act, but hey, great defenses do it. And just one quick note, we mentioned DT, the finals being so close and could have gone either way when you looked at the matchups going in. I think you could say that for the entire season this year. I mean, the parity this year, every team went on a bit of a down streak. Every team went on a bit of a roll. The Bombers started 0-4 to the season, and then they got on a roll. And their only loss in a chunk of wins was the Toronto Argonauts.
Yep.
Is there anything to be said, David, about this whole, because it comes up every year, and I just don't know if there's an actual solution to it. The rest versus rust. Because to me, I don't know what, I mean, some would argue that the Alouettes weren't playing well going into the East Final. But they got that rest. And I would think your body would tell you that having that week off would benefit you. But the way they came out in front of an outstanding crowd at Molson Percival Stadium as well, too. And they just were flatsy-patsy.
That was the surprising part for me, really. I mean, look, no one knows better than having the rest versus rust when the Argos played Montreal last year in 2023, right? They just didn't look sharp. Obviously, Chad Kelly with the abundance of turnovers that he had in that game, but Montreal, to me, that's what surprised me the most. You would think like Jason Maas, given his experience in the league, given everything that team had been through, would have had his team kind of understanding that, they haven't been their best going into it, but the playoffs change everything, right? You get a fresh slate. You just go out there and you leave it all out in the field, right? There's in a lot of cases, no tomorrow for at least two of the teams, right? So you got to put out your best foot forward. And that was the surprising part to me. It just looked like, they were had some good plays, but they weren't making those game breaking plays like through the air as much as I thought I was going to expect from Montreal. Wallen Fletcher was just tearing up that Argos defense, right? And then the turnovers, it felt like every turnover they had took whatever momentum they were getting in that game. It was just like they were shooting themselves in the foot, which, I mean, you just can't do in the CFL, right? You can have so many yards in the game, but everyone will look at the takeaways, the giveaways, and say that's just you just can't do that. And that to me is what Montreal did, right? I didn't feel like they were like rusty per se. I just felt like they weren't sharp, and part of that came from all those turnovers that they had. They just were not. Situational awareness was not there for them.
Glenn, we've talked about this fella before, but he used to wear another color. The quarterback, Cody Fajardo didn't. He had a week off or two. He had welcomed in another, I believe, a son to his family. Mm-hmm. I don't know. He was on top of the world just a year ago going into that Grey Cup. And I think questions about kind of what we saw in Saskatchewan kind of were in that game a little bit, because I thought Montreal's defense did a decent job. I don't think Chad Kelly was all that good except for that final drive of the first half. But Cody just didn't look like the guy to me.
Well, I think in the first three drives, he missed some plays. He's missed some throws that would have turned into big plays. And one was a touchdown throw that he just missed, overthrew on a couple of deep balls. And, again, you don't get other opportunities because good teams will make the adjustments to make sure you don't get that deep throw again, at least the same way. I would say this, though, about rest and rust. I, as a player, a former player in me, would have preferred to have that week off and first in the division, because you can self-scout, you can heal up, so you're as fresh as you can be at that time of year. And if there is a little rust, you should be able to break it off in the first series or two. However, Montreal had a unique situation. They were defending champions. So they were a target all year, and then had that going in, like, we could do this without maybe getting to that same level of intensity they needed. And how long did they play after locking up first? Oof. It was probably a month. Yeah. Maybe 4 games or 5 games. DT, you might know this one, but I looked at that and thought, boy, that could be a formula where the rust becomes a thing. I think the Bombers situation is ideal. You get that extra week to self-scout. You're fresh. You only played 2 weeks ago, so it's not that big a gap, and you're ready to go when that visiting team comes in town.
Yeah, the thing with the Owls, like, they came in winning 2 of their last 7, right? So their slump, whatever you want to call it, started before they'd actually clinched the East. I think we all kind of thought, well, this is going to happen whenever it happens. But they started losing that game to BC. They lost. They tied Calgary. Calgary was not a real good football team this year. So down the stretch, they lost 4. They tied 1, and they beat only Ottawa. And I went, oh, okay. When the Bombers were going to play them in week 21, I went, oh, okay, well, I don't know what to expect from this Montreal team. They were good. Like, they looked really good in that game against Winnipeg. It was a must win for Winnipeg that only as Dwayne Ford said, God is a Bomber fan, the win that blew Joe Zima awry.
Great line too.
It was incredible. Montreal on the whole looked really good. Fajardo was a little loose on the first couple drives in that game, but he was on point after that. And I thought, leaving that game, am I going to have to reconsider this thing where I think Toronto is the favorite in the East? Because, man, they had a little of everything. Tyrese Beverette was making plays. They were covering the Bombers the way they cover. And maybe, sometimes games aren't meant to go your way. But I've dropped the stat everywhere I keep going. From 2000 through last year, 67% of the teams that go to the Grey Cup were the number one seed. So this year we get 1-1, one first seed, one second seed. But you get that week off. You're the better team. You get that game at home where, in our case, the Princess Auto Stadium crowd is absolutely blasting out the eardrums of Trevor Harris and the Saskatchewan offense. I would take that over everything. But I'm with Suits in that the Bombers, it was the perfect situation for them. Have to be sharp in that final must-win game, then get the week off. That sounds, if you could pick a way to go, I think that would be the one.
Derek, actually, this was funny because I listened to you. I was in the car for a while. So I listened to you for pretty much the first half and then listened to Suits for the second half. That's
a dream Saturday. That's amazing.
It was outstanding. Did I hear you say that there's a running statistic at Princess Auto Stadium for the amount of false starts against the opposing team?
Oh, so there was one where I actually didn't know they did this, so I learned it from my Ed Tate, who I was doing the game with. Toronto takes a procedure penalty, or pardon me, Saskatchewan takes a procedure penalty, and on the big Jumbotron, they flash up the number. I think it was 162. So they're essentially, someone since day one has been counting the number of penalties that they say the crowd caused to the opposing offense. So I thought that was hilarious.
That's spectacular.
I'm making a note, gentlemen. That's making the show next year.
Yeah, that was super. Whoever thought to do that when the stadium opened, genius. And yeah, it continues to this day because then the crowd just gets up a little more for the next play. Oh, 1st and 15. Good luck with that because we're going to 130 decibels.
Well, those second down situations for the opposing team, whether it be on radio or television, hearing the crowd just crescendo like that, my goodness, it is something to really listen to. Dave, we'll start with you here with the West Final here. When you're trying to break down the game and look at the particulars and you're thinking to yourself, wow, the Bombers have not run well against Saskatchewan this year as a team, actually. They're in trouble because to me, this is the time of year where Brady Oliveira really kicks in the fall. It kind of didn't matter because Zach Collaros just went wild.
That was the surprising part to me because Corey Mace went against Zach Collaros in the Grey Cup in 2022 and held him in check in that game. So I thought, if you're Corey Mace, you kind of know what you need to do against Zach Collaros, and it didn't happen in this game, right? And the Bombers, what was impressive with what Collaros was able to do was he threw for 300 yards. He threw for the 4 touchdowns, but he only had to make 29 pass attempts. It wasn't like they needed him to throw the ball a lot. And I think that's when Zach Collaros is at his best, when he doesn't need to throw the ball a lot. It also helps that Brady Oliveira can, take 20 carries a game like he always does. And that keeps the defense obviously on its toes, right? You can do your best to limit Brady Oliveira. In this game, obviously he had, probably his best game against Saskatchewan, and that was a surprising thing is the formula was there for Saskatchewan, but the execution was not. And you credit Winnipeg because they made it extremely difficult on Saskatchewan to follow through with their game plan.
Glenn, I thought they were just brilliant on all. You talk about complementary football on all sides of the football, and Winnipeg. Like it was no contest really.
Well, I first of all, I liked where Buck Pierce, the offensive coordinator, switched to southpaw when everyone was talking about stopping Brady Oliveira, and he went, "Yeah, go ahead." In the first 3 series, Zach just kind of went to work, and Kenny Lawler was his number 1 target, as you guys know. So it was kind of like you want to stop one aspect of this offense, no problem. You want to load the box for Brady Oliveira, no problem. We'll throw it behind you. So, there was that sort of jumped off the page immediately. But the key to me, guys, was there were moments in the game where Trevor Harris had a chance to try and match and keep pace with that Bomber offense. And Evan Holm was all over the field making plays and knockdowns, and they were forcing the ball to Sam Emelis and couldn't get it to him because Evan Holm was making plays. And I just thought, even though they've gone through some changes, and DT, you'd know best, but they still get plays from guys you don't expect. And Tyrell Ford made another few good plays on defense late in that game. So that was the interesting part to me, was that Trevor, who's got experience and was hot going in, he couldn't get it to his playmakers.
Yeah, and that was the thing we were watching for in the game is they've played each other 3 times in the regular season. How is Jordan Younger, the defensive coordinator? He's got to have something different, right? You got to give him something different. We had thought, okay, well, he's overwhelmingly prioritizing coverage this season. If I had to guess at his second down blitz rate, it's probably under 10% because it's 3 defensive linemen, maybe a linebacker, and 8 defensive backs. That's what they've been all season long. We thought, okay, well, they're going to throw more 4 and 5 and 6-man rushes at them. No, he went, you know what we're going to do? We're throwing a 9th defensive back out there for the first time this season. And Trevor, best of luck at finding the holes. And as the game went along, you just went, these Riders receivers just don't have any room at all. And total props to Kean Schaefer-Baker for being able to make catches with a dude all over him. What did he end up with? 12 catches, whatever it was. I don't know that he was open on more than 2 of those, and he still made those catches. But Evan Holm was suffocating. Dietrich Nichols didn't get tested. Nick Taylor in his first game of the season doing his work at safety. Reddick Cramdy is just a missile flying around there hurting dudes. Terrell Bonds is a rookie at that boundary corner spot. He's knocking passes away. Tyrell Ford could have been most outstanding Canadian if a couple more votes had gone his way. Like, the degree to which we thought they would zig and they zagged, but we knew something would be different. I didn't know that it was going to be, let's drop 9 and figure out and see if they can figure this out. And, you get just enough from the front against an offensive line that really, they were on their 14th different combination of offensive line. The Riders were this season. You get just enough up front with Willie and company. You get some pass knockdowns. And I dare you to find the hole in this coverage, and those holes just were not there for Saskatchewan. So a real testament to a first-year defensive coordinator in Jordan Younger, because, man, they gave him these horses, and did they run.
Glenn, you guys had that view that we just don't really get to see enough of, the up-top view, certainly from the television cut. We don't get to see that. Like, okay, and I'm not trying to be too sarcastic here, but, like, it seemed to me that Kenny Lawler was running wild. And I mean, Roland Milligan, we're talking about him being the best defensive player in the league. There were several, I thought, busts in the defense. How did that happen?
Well, I would say there was one clear bust that I actually drew. I don't know if you could have seen that if you're listening on radio, but I got the telestrator going and showed that it was supposed to be a cover 3, and someone blew the coverage and didn't get it. It was actually
I saw that. That was in the second half. I saw it.
Yeah, it was either Roland Milligan or Amari Henderson, I think. One of those 2 guys had to be deep third, and they weren't. And Lawler, that was his 3rd touchdown, I believe. And that, to me, clearly looked like a bust. The other 2 were different and almost sort of schemed well by Buck Pierce. That deep post layered across the middle that he got, I think, was his first touchdown. I hadn't really seen Lawler run a route like that all the way across the formation that deep throughout the games that I had covered. So, I think there was a couple of things going on there. One was let's go southpaw because they think Brady Oliveira is our only weapon. So let's forget about that for the first quarter. They went back to it in the second half, but the first quarter, and then I'm going to scheme up some great plays for Kenny Lawler. And you make a mistake against Zach Collaros, you're gonna get beat. I mean, that you can't make a mistake in the back end against a veteran like that.
David, right to that point, and I'm being honest here, guys. Like, this is no joke. I can show you about 5 different people that have sent messages to me on social media or at me on Twitter and whatever, asking me why, as a representative of the Tiger Cats. By the way, why did we get rid of Zach Collaros? Like,
it was bad because it was bad. Yeah, it was bad in 17. That's why it didn't. The offense wasn't good in 17.
They were 0-8. Like, it just seemed like June Jones made the move to Masoli. It seemed like the right move, but I mean, I'll tell you, David, like Zach Collaros. I mean, even from he had a good career with the Tiger Cats to that point, and even through injuries with Saskatchewan and then getting traded to Toronto, didn't even play. But oh my goodness, just what he's done with Winnipeg is, I mean, it's legendary.
Don't remind Argos fans that Zach Collaros was in that quarterback room. I interviewed Zach Collaros, and then not long after he was gone. That obviously came after Jim Pop was fired because they were within striking distance of putting pen to paper on a contract. He was going to be Toronto's quarterback going forward, but then Jim Pop gets fired. Pinball comes in and everything changes, right? It's scorched earth. And obviously they did Zach Collaros the biggest favor of all in trading him to Winnipeg because that obviously resurrected his career. He goes on, he's now up to 5 straight Grey Cups, which is just unreal, right? And I've always been a big Zach Collaros fan. You know, he's always an easy guy to talk to. It's hard to to really say anything bad about him. You kind of are in his corner, right? And so I have a lot of admiration for what he's done because, you know, a lot of people, I don't like bringing up NFL references, but a lot of people kind of brought the Zach Collaros situation like Tua Tagovailoa. Why are you playing, right? It's concussions, everything he had been through, he still wanted to play. He knew he still had a lot to give to this game. And I give him a lot of credit because, you know, everyone was telling him maybe it's time to just hang it up. And he didn't want to, and now look at where his career is, right? For sure, Hall of Famer, right? And frankly, I thought he would have at least more than just the 2 Grey Cups to his name at this point with his time with the Bombers, considering how dominant they've been. So, yeah, it's if you're Toronto, you know that you're going to have your hands full with Zach because he always finds ways to make big plays, and him and Kenny Lawler too. That combination is probably the deadliest in the league.
You know, DT, I think about him. I think about Zach, and I'm sticking with this here. I'm going to go back to the Ticats and Bombers, the game I would have been a little after Labor Day. And all season long, we're saying Zach doesn't got it this year. Like, he had thrown more interceptions, I think, than touchdown passes. Even in that game at Princess Auto Stadium with the Ticats and Bombers, I think he threw 3 picks. He threw 3 interceptions. Yet the game was close enough, and with about a little over a minute left, he had the ball, marched the ball down the field, and then I think hit Ontario Wilson with a touchdown. Like, it was vintage Zach, just needing to get the job done when it had to. And as I said, this guy's got to have legendary status in your community.
Oh, 100%. Up to and including Labor Day, he'd thrown 13 picks. Post Labor Day, 2 interceptions. And you go, okay, something's come along the way. And it to me, I call Zach improvisational genius. I am the governor of Collaros Island, self-proclaimed since 2019. I fell in love with him in that 2015 season in Hamilton. And when he came to Winnipeg, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be a problem for us, as I was the voice of the Riders at the time. I did not enjoy that move coming at all. And you just see it now because, I'm going to roll it to my right and I'm just going to cut your heart out. We identified this thing on a play, and Zach told us post game. I said to Buck Pierce, if they do this again, we need to go to Kenny. And there he is, burning past Amari Henderson before Lacombo can get over for his 3rd touchdown of the game. And you go, this guy. This is why when the top 50 poll comes out next year, Zach's going to be in the top 3. Like, as even though his season was down from a touchdowns perspective, he'll kill you. He will absolutely slaughter you. And they're doing this with a rookie in Pokey Wilson, a rookie in Kevin Sklercius. They don't have Drew Wolotarski. They lost Dalton Schoen super early. That's right. Revamped offensive line, and yet when it matters, just absolutely cutting the heart out of a team. that had all the good vibes in their favor coming off the West semifinal win over BC. He is accurate. He is relentless. He's set a career, like he's had the most scramble run yards since at least 2014 this season that he's had. So that's 10 years in which he hasn't scrambled more than he has this year. Zach has been kind of everything under incredibly trying circumstances that you get when you're on top and other teams come and take your players away.
And he's fiery too.
Bubba, he's been the best quarterback in the league since he moved to Winnipeg. Like,
yeah.
That's I don't think it's close. Other guys have had good years. Bo's had a very good year on a team that didn't make the playoffs, but and very well may win the MOP. But the best quarterback in the league, and I don't think it's very close, has been Zach since he moved in 19 to Winnipeg.
No, it just doesn't always show in November like it did in this one, right? That's the big deal for Bomber fans this time around.
And there's been really relatively in his time with Winnipeg, not a lot of injuries. That's
nothing lasting, right? Took a head injury against Edmonton last year. Took a shot this year, but like nothing like Saskatchewan. Nothing there. So thank goodness for that. Bomber fans are very grateful.
Stanley Bryan and the boys have something to say about that.
Yeah. Well, Stanley's another guy that we keep saying, I think he's done. He's looking old. And then look where he is, right? It's amazing to me.
It's good to have Hall of Famers on your side. Yeah, exactly.
It's okay. Glenn, I'm going to start with you on this. This is an interesting year. This is an interesting week in this Grey Cup week because a little later in the week, we're going to have the commissioner's address, which will be his final address as commissioner, Randy Ambrosie of the league. Trying to keep it positive on the line here, because there's a lot of things you could get into. But what do you think was his most outstanding accomplishment in, I guess, the 7 years that he was the commissioner of the Canadian Football League?
Well, I think there's two things. One is, and it hasn't been talked about a lot, but one is the length of term of the CBA that he got done. I mean, a 7-year collective agreement with the players, crucial to allow the owners and the teams to sort of build some momentum. And that was very important because prior to that, and we've gone through 3 or 4 commissioners, that CBA came up every 2 years, and it just would crush momentum. There'd be labor discussions. There'd be issues going on. It was always bad press. And, it's hard for an owner or an organization to get some momentum there. So that was one of them. And I also think, the owners now, I don't know how much Randy can sort of take all the credit for this, but the new owners that the league has, I don't think, I mean, they're outstanding. I don't think we've had a time, at least in my time in the league, either as a player or a broadcaster, we've seen this quality of ownership and not just deep pockets, owners that have tremendous passion because they've been fans their whole lives, tons of money, yes, but they want to do it the right way for their city. And that's what we have in the 3 new owners in the league now.
David?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one there is getting that ownership situation in Montreal sorted out, BC, Toronto, Toronto with the way that's worked out. All teams, you're not hearing, chatter about, the ownership is unstable. Like he's put that to rest. That was always an issue through, prior to him joining, right? And when he first came about. So I think that's a big win in the Ambrosie column, considering where the league was before he came here. But at the same time, there's still, there's always ways for leagues to improve, right? And, how do we get to the younger generation, right? I think that's going to be, the next caveat for whoever takes over for him. How do we, transform the game in a way that gets to that younger demographic? Because I mean, Toronto's been better, but I still think, with the way that stadium still is not full, they're clearly, behind the 8 ball when it comes to all the other teams in this town that it's always a tough sell for the Argos because they're so much lower on that totem pole for entertainment and sports. But they've made some headway. It's just how can the commissioner now help sell the game in a way to fans that are, that maybe haven't watched CFL football before.
David, I'm going to put that in the hands of Keith Pelly, though. Yeah. Like, to me,
yes.
That's a Keith Pelly thing. Like, I feel like Keith Pelly's, as we all know, a really smart dude. And Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment got some really, really intelligent. Look what they've done with the Raptors, and which is not a, quote, Canadian sport. The Leafs take care of themselves. But I feel like that is something that Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, they made soccer cool when soccer wasn't all that cool either. So to me, that is more of the ownership thing, more so than Randy. I mean, the opportunity is there for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment to make the Argonauts, which are a foundational part of this league, to be as important as they should be in that community.
And Keith Pelly, I've been told, has a million ideas. He is going like a mile a minute, right, with this Argos team. Keith, with his experience in the CFL, I think they couldn't have brought a better partner into trying to help the Argos in that regard. I just think when it comes to the league itself, what new innovative ways can the league, help in that regard in terms of, obviously their big thing now was, with sports betting and, getting the streaming set up, right? Like having all those things, right? And Ambrosie speaking now, I know that as we're recording that there's going to be a lot of critics about things that were done off the field too, right, as well during his time. But he was thrown into a lot of tough situations. I think he did pretty good, and it helps that he understands the league as well as he does, because they've had commissioners in the past that didn't really understand what this league needed in past years, in my opinion.
Yeah, DT and Bubba, I disagreed with a ton of things that Randy did and tried to do. But DT, I'm not sure your position on him, but again, to stay positive, couple of good things that he's done over the last 7 years.
Yeah, there are a bunch we could dive into. I don't know if I'm one of the few guys who stands for the CFL 2.0 program, but I love the thought of that, right? It hasn't made them any money, but I thought, you know what? You need to find revenue in this post-COVID world. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to find it? Well, we've got TV broadcasts that with a flick of a switch, we could sell to somebody if they want it. Okay, well, let's expand our rosters. And okay, it's turned out to be most of the punters in the league are now Australian, but man, if they aren't great at punting, I don't know what. That's been a ton of fun to watch from a super football nerd perspective. But I've enjoyed that. I enjoyed, in the first year when it was drafting from the European League and drafting from the Mexican League, talking to Rene Bracea, who was the guy the Riders had drafted, and just a guy who wanted to play football. And this was a massive jump up in skill level for him. But I just love seeing young guys who want to play football get a chance to play football. So, for every Fabian Weitz and Lucky Ogbavone, guys who the Bombers drafted this year, watching them come to Canada and get a chance to play football, I think that one's super neat. The ownership thing, where Suits went, is where I would go too, with what's the biggest one of, man, Montreal and BC. Going to a game in BC now versus when I would have started doing games in 2019 pre-Amar Doman, just a world of difference. The game in week 21, I was calling in Montreal. I've never seen a crowd like that in Montreal. And I don't know what was results, what was the weather that day, what was Pierre-Carl Pelado, but man, the ownership situation of the CFL is the best that it's been since I started covering it. So to some degree, Randy needs some credit for that. I don't know how much, but he certainly needs some for that.
Well, and I'm going to say this as well too, and you guys can comment on this, that on the whole, and again, I don't know how much credit this is to Randy, but he's the commissioner, so he's the one I got to think about. Is the game to me as a whole, the game to me is better, more exciting than it's ever been. I feel like every game is going down, and it's not every game, but Derek, you would know the stat. Every game is going down to the final 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. And to me, that I'll commend him, because I feel like the right little rule tweaks have happened. We've maintained the Canadian sort of aspect of the rouge and things, where that comes up as an argument every once in a while. But the game to me, Glenn, is as exciting as it's ever been.
Well, I think the stat there, and DT would know best, but I'm sure I think it was over 60% of the games that were decided in the final 3 minutes, and there was a stat on how many were decided by 4 or less points, and that's there. But I think in a lot of ways, Bubba, that has been there in the past, but our messaging, and I say us because we're all sort of involved at different levels, but the commissioner is the most important when it comes to the messaging. And I thought early in Randy's career, the messaging was, we have a lot of things we need to fix. And I think when you do that as the leader of a company, what you're saying to the customer is, we're broken and we have a lot of things we need to fix. Rather than do that, now they're saying, and over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been saying, this is the best version of the game of football on the planet. It's not the biggest business, but it's the best version of the game. And we're proving it week in and week out. The athlete on the field is putting on a fantastic show. And that is not, fake news. That's not a fabricated headline to be able to message from the league down. This is the best and most exciting form of the game of football on the planet. And I think when that shifted, and now, David, to your point, if Toronto messages that for 10 years now, then I think you will see the young kids start to figure it out. Because I've watched it in real time, guys, here in Vancouver. DT, you mentioned Amar Doman. I've had meetings with Amar and sat and had a glass of wine with Amar. His goal is to grow the game of football, and the business will take care of itself. And that's what he's doing in the province of BC with young kids and flag football, and his kids play flag football. So, I think that's the difference, really, the messaging and the confidence in our game. I think the excitement level has been there. We just were saying it differently 2-3 years ago, and now we're saying, it's the best on the planet.
All right, guys. The best, maybe championship in the planet will happen in days from now. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Toronto Argonauts. DT, did they take the mic away from you for this game?
They did, yeah. So I'll be the annoying guy in the press box going, oh, look at that. Oh, there it is. Oh, look, there's an 8th defensive back. Oh, the punter's on the field for the final play of the game. That'll be me. So you'll see everybody kind of giving me a wider berth as the game goes along, because I'll just be commentating it to myself.
With all due respect to CTV and whatever agreement they have with the Canadian Football League, when I become the commissioner, the local broadcaster, when they reach the Grey Cup game, will still be able to do the radio broadcast. I'm not a fan of that rule. Not a fan of that rule. Anyway, I'd say that even if it wasn't you, Derek. David, let's start with you. Argos, Bombers, Grey Cup, Sunday. What's going to happen?
Well, first off, I'm going to make sure I stay close to Derek, because I'm going to want that insight in the press box first and foremost.
Come on down.
I'll be joining the party there. If the Argos don't find a way to get pressure on Collaros like they did early in the year, because Winnipeg's going to make adjustments, I don't know if this defense is going to be able to hold up, and that offense is going to have to be able to find a way to stay on the field too. So I give Winnipeg the edge in this one, just because they got more going for them than Toronto at this point. But I expect this to be a close game. They've all been close games in all these meetings that Toronto and Winnipeg has had. So I expect this to be a close game, but I give Winnipeg the edge here.
DT.
I think massively Winnipeg has the edge. Just the quarterback situation. There's nothing that anyone can kind of do about Chad Kelly breaking his leg going into this game. That said, it was Cameron Dukes and then a lot of Nick Arbuckle in the first matchup, the one in Toronto, that the Argos won in overtime because Winnipeg kept tripping over its own feet in that one. And then in the second one, it was, frankly, in both games, that Argos defensive front just savaged the Bombers. Savaged. The first one, Patty Neufeld was injured, and I think it was Serezna's second sack. It drove Neufeld from the game. He just couldn't deal with his knee problem. 7 sacks in that second game, and it was everybody along that front. Toronto has been having some problems this season. They have the second highest passer rating against on defense. So when you get to their secondary, you can get their secondary. But if that front is causing the Bombers problems, this one is going to be tighter. I thought it was super interesting, just to drop some gambling here. The Bombers team total was 30 for this game on the sports books. They scored 25 in the 2 games combined against the Argos. That's how bad this matchup was for the Bombers in the regular season. So I don't think the Chad Kelly to Nick Arbuckle problem is insurmountable for the Argos, because if you get in Arbuckle's ear, he can do some stuff. But it's such a massive blow to the Argos to go from a guy who is among the best quarterbacks in the league to a guy who is trying to keep himself afloat in the CFL. Short passing has been his thing. They're going to have to move the ball down the field, but where do you do that against 9-man zone drops? I really don't think this third matchup between the two is really in any way. It's really not set up for the Argos to prosper.
Glenn, I know you have a professional obligation, so I'll set it up in a different way for you, just to be fair. What do the Argonauts have to do to win the Grey Cup?
Well, first of all, my opinion on the radio thing is I'm not allowed to say, so I'll just
my radio buddy right there.
But wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm with you, Bubba, on that one. Anyway, yeah, no, you know what? For the Argos to win, as DT mentioned, I think collectively they haven't got enough credit throughout the league, throughout the season, but collectively they're the best D-line in the league, and that includes their rotational players. Like it's not like they're bringing in a backup to rotate and give Remilade a rest. They're not doing that. They're bringing in an all-star caliber player to give Remilade a rest. So that pressure always trumps coverage to me. Pressure trumps coverage. But the quarterback situation is why I would favor the Bombers in a big way, because it's one thing to come off the bench and play a half or a quarter and a half or whatever. It's another to be game planned against. And right now, the Bombers defensively will be working on everything that Arbuckle does well and everything that he doesn't do well. And they're going to try and force him into doing things that he doesn't do well. So that's to me why they're favored. But like the season, Bubba, has unfolded, this is it. You know, I don't know how much they'll be favored for. DT, you know this off the top of your head, I'm sure. But I just anybody can win on any given night. And that front seven gets going, it'll be another low-scoring game, and the Argos can be right in it, right to the end.
Yeah, 10.5-point favorites the Bombers got up to. Wow. I'm told before the Kelly injury, it was 3.5. I didn't see it myself, but I was told it was 3.5. So that'd be a 7-point move on the Kelly to Arbuckle.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, David, can I bring this up? Because I feel like the last time we saw these two teams in this situation, and, you know, McLeod Bethel Thompson was the quarterback of that team, the starting quarterback at least, that Winnipeg were kind of the favored team as well, too. And look what happened, right? Like the Argos sometimes, I think over the last 15 years or so, when we keep wanting to knock off the Argos as a bad franchise or what I mean, they keep showing up the Grey Cups and they keep winning in these Grey Cup games.
I mean, fortunately, you know, especially like, you know, look at 2017 when they went up against Calgary. They did have Ricky Ray at quarterback, so that was a little bit of an you can maybe understand why that one went that way for Toronto. But when you look at the last two, you know, their last one against Winnipeg, yeah, I didn't think Toronto was going to win that one just because, you know, Winnipeg was the class of the league. They were doing everything right, but Toronto had the right game plan going against when. I mean, look, even the chaos of the fourth quarter where McLeod Bethel Thompson had the dislocated thumb, here comes Chad Kelly and he leads him on that fourth quarter comeback to win the game, right? So if there is a team that understands what it means to deal with circumstances that were beyond their control and unexpected, it is Toronto. I think a lot of credit goes to, again, Ryan Dinwiddie for putting his players in a position to succeed when things go awry. And so I do think that that's maybe the one thing that Toronto has on their side is they've been counted out many times before, but they just know what they need to do in the right situations at least keep it close. And when you keep it close, it's anyone's game.
Can we close on this? I'm going to ask each for one player a kind of I told you so kind of one player, like one player where you're like, I told you this guy could hurt us or hurt you or whatever the case is. Derek, we'll start with you.
From the Grey Cup game?
Yeah, it'll be like an unsung hero or an X Factor player, someone where you're like, that kind of maybe isn't the mainstream guy that you could see making a big play in this game or somehow affecting the game.
Oh, I think I'll pick a Bomber because it would hurt to pick an Argo in this case. I'd take Redick Cramdy, their dime defensive back, number 6. He's a guy who the Bombers start 2 Canadians in their back 6, which BC at one point had 3, but not a lot of teams, have the horses to go 2 Canadians among their defensive backs. But there's Redick Cramdy, catching strays from fans for, it should be somebody else. It should be an American. Why is this guy out there? All Cramdy does is make plays and play smart football. And man, he goes to the ball hard and fast. Tackles for a loss have been his specialty this year. When you're that dime defensive back, you get isolated against the number 3 guy and you go, Kean Schaefer-Baker, that's a challenge. This time it'll be Mackay Polk. That's a challenge. Polk is having a fantastic season, but in some of these formations, he's the safety. He's over here. He's this. He's that. Redick Cramdy to me is a guy who I could absolutely see. He makes 2 plays that were just in the moment perfect. The ball bounced just the Bombers' way, and we're all lauding him at the end of the game. There's a lot of real great cover guys on that Bomber defense, and Redick Cramdy is a guy who won't get all the attention of a Ford, a Holm, a Dietrich Nichols, but he certainly deserves some of the love.
Glenn?
Yeah, I'm going to go if this is not allowed to be a big name guy, then okay, because I think Dembski is always a key factor, but he's a big name guy, so we'll stay away from him. I think if I'm playing defense against what I saw in the West Final in Toronto's case, I am making sure that I make it very tough for Zach to get it to Kenny Lawler. So I'm going to try to take that away and make him throw it somewhere else. And if that happens, Ontario Wilson, who didn't have a big final statistically, but is certainly capable. That's a 1,000-yard guy. So I think he could be one that the Bombers sort of evolve to. I got to stay with a popular name in Toronto. I'll give you one in Toronto, and I think it's Janarian Grant. I think whether the Bombers are trying to punt it away from him, which will take distance off the punt, and maybe now you're looking at different field position because they're trying so hard to keep it away from him, or him just returning. I think that field position could be a big part of this game.
D?
For me, when you look at this Argos offense, they got a lot of weapons, but one player that Ryan Dinwiddie always likes to bring up is David Unger, because he is a guy that is so reliable. And I would bring a little Hamilton spice to this as well. He always lauds Unger is the first at the stadium. He's putting in the extra work, and he only had 2 targets in these final, but arguably he had one of the more important plays on that 20-yard catch. That's what David Unger is about. He doesn't need to have the big target share, but when he's called upon, he is going to make a play. And I think that he's a guy that, against Winnipeg in that last game, he had the big touchdown, right? When you try to keep with Polk and Coxie, you can even throw DeVars Daniels into it. That allows a guy like David Unger to make some plays. And you might expect to hear his name a couple of times in this Grey Cup.
And Bubba, remember 2 years ago, it was Robbie Smith.
Oh, yes.
Blocking a field goal.
Yes. And making a big sack late in that fourth quarter, too.
Yes.
Why would you guys rub that in? Why would you do that? Just the drive-by.
I'm just following Glenn's lead on this one.
Wait, Derek, hold on. Weren't you wearing green at that time?
No, that was my first year of the gold. So having to watch my whole world be upended while I was at the whatever it was, Radisson in Regina, watching the game, going, block field goals, 2 block field goals in the game. If stupid McLeod Bethel Thompson doesn't get hurt, Chad Kelly doesn't come in, the Bombers would have won this game if it was MBT. Man, the Grey Cups are crazy. And Toronto Grey Cups, 2 block field goals, 2017, 200-yard touchdowns, 1 on the offense, 1 on the defense. I'm past the years where I would write, there's 23 reasons why the Calgary Stampeders will win the Grey Cup and 2 reasons why they won't, and they go on to lose that Grey Cup while I'm standing on the field watching it. So, yeah. Well, Winnipeg, massive favorite, but oh boy, I'm holding my breath all day Sunday.
Derek, hold on. I just thought about this. No Streveler here. He's not available for this game. So if there's going to be any crazy thing that happened that maybe Zach gets injured, who's the backup quarterback in Winnipeg now?
So it's Terry Wilson is a rookie, and then Jake Dolegala, late of BC and Saskatchewan, is the number 3. And that's one of the questions we've wondered of if Zach were to get hurt and it were to be a full-time, we need a quarterback situation, would they go to the rookie or would they go to the guy with more experience in Dolegala, though less time with the team? I don't know the answer to that. I hope to never find out the answer to that. But, I mean, it would really turn that game on its head, wouldn't it?
It would be wild. Guys, let's hope for a great Grey Cup game. In fact, I should even say that it always is a great Grey Cup game. And one of the great things about our game is that our championship match, we put it up against any Super Bowl, and it's just as legendary. So, and you guys have been outstanding. David, Derek, Glenn, I really appreciate what you give for us here at the Ticats Audio Network with your time, your opinions, your humor. It's great to have you as we wrap up another season here. Let's hope, as I said, for a really, really good game. And again, all the people that have participated in the CFL this week, so many of you from around the country, really, really love what we do here. I think it's kind of rare that we're all able from across the country to talk about the game from our different markets and all have some fun and, rip each other and share some good opinions as well, too. So to our production crew as well, too, our executive producer, it's a great thing that we're doing. I think at the Ticats Audio Network, I think we're starting to see this in BC. We're starting to see this kind of communication with the fans as well, too, all around the league. And I think we're on to something good for the CFL overall. Anyway, folks, enjoy the Grey Cup game. This is our sign off here. We'll be back, I guess, for free agency with lots of talk about the Ticats on the Ticats Audio Network. Please join us then. And until then, we'll see you soon.